Lately I've been playing around with these print-at-home quilt labels, and I really like them. I think they could turn out super cute, and it's just a little bit of added personalization on the back of your quilt. These two right here are rejects because I sort of got them off center and I didn't pay very good attention to them when I was finishing them, but I have attached two others to a quilt, and then I got to thinking, I figured I should probably do some more experiments with this process before I use it on any more quilts, just in case they wear out quickly or they fade or fray or whatever. I think I should do a little bit more testing before I add them to any more quilts. Before I move on, I'm going to mention that this was not my idea. I saw this done on Instagram from a creator called House of Claire, and I'm going to link to that video that I saw in the description of this video. I think she uses her tags for clothes that she sells, and her video is very quick and informative, so I highly recommend checking her out on Instagram. These are the test prints for my next batch of labels, and you'll notice I added some lines to hopefully help me center these a little better than these ones. Although I do think I might skip the blocky squares for a couple of them. This one would be good with a nice curve, and the same with this one. I also shrunk the designs down a bit because I think the originals were just a little bit too big. I think these ones are a little bit more manageable. I do think I'm going to finish them like this again with the top stitch and like a little patch because I just like the look and how it sits up off of the fabric a little bit when I sew it down. There are three things I'm experimenting on with this batch, and one of them is using color. So I have a dark pinky purple here, a red here, and I just want to see how it prints and also if it lasts as long as the darker ink through washes and wear and everything. The second thing I want to test is the ink setting method, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. The last thing that I'm experimenting with is just how long these tags will last. So I'm going to take them all and sew them down. I'll make them into patches and sew them down onto this mini quilt. And then I'm going to toss this mini quilt into every single load of laundry I do over the next few months. And then I'll report back here on my channel how it turns out and how the tags hold up. So first things first, I need to iron my fabric and then iron this freezer paper that's 8.5 by 11 inches. I'm going to iron it right onto that fabric so it can go through my printer. I used muslin for my first batch of patches, and I got a lot of extra ink on the freezer paper that bled through the fabric, so I'm hoping that with some quilter's cotton, it's slightly thicker, although you can see the pattern underneath this pretty well, but it is thicker than muslin, so I'm hoping that it will take the ink a little bit better and have less bleed through, and hopefully that means I'll have a darker print. Okay, I flipped my fabric so that the right side is facing down, the wrong side is facing up, and it's time to add my freezer paper. If you haven't used freezer paper this way before, there is a papery side and a shiny side, and you want your shiny side to touch your fabric because that's the sticky part. That's what's going to melt to your fabric. Or not melt, adhere to your fabric. After that has been securely fixed to your fabric, you just need to trim it up and then it can go into your printer. So this is what the fabric sheets look like attached to the freezer paper. And I know from trial and error that I need to put it fabric side down. I can push that back in. So something definitely went wrong with that first print. Look at that, there's a huge smudge. I think this corner got caught or something because it's not down, or it's not attached as well as it was originally. But these bottom three look fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and still use those, but before I print on this other piece, I'm gonna give it another pass with my iron just to make sure everything is attached really well. Let's go ahead and try that again. So fabric side down. look pretty good. I don't see any, oh, there's some smudges at the very top right here, but not enough to mess with any of the other tags. So I think those look pretty good. Here are my labels, and on closer inspection, I didn't notice this by the printer, but look how wobbly those lines are. I did not notice that before. So wobbly lines on the border, not a big deal. Wobbly lines in the design, not so great. But since this is just mainly a test of how the ink holds up, I'm going to go ahead and use this and not worry too much about the wobbly lines. Much crisper story over here. Really nice and crisp lines and no smudges. So the next step is to remove this freezer paper. And I'm noticing right away that there's a lot less fraying on the edges compared to the muslin I did. So that looks good. And that will do. Okay, let's talk about setting the ink. So that basically just means we're trying to get the ink to stay in the fabric and not wash out. And there's a lot of different ways that people set inks and dyes and all that kind of stuff. But the original video that I told you about at the beginning of this video uses white distilled vinegar. And that's the method that I used on the patches that I've done so far. So I'm going to do that process again with this sheet of labels and just follow her directions as is. I'm just going to let that soak for 15 to 20 minutes, then I'm going to rinse it out in the sink and let it dry flat. And then for this sheet, I want to do something a little different because I would rather not have to use vinegar if I don't have to. So if I can find an alternate method of setting the ink, that would be wonderful. So instead of the vinegar, I'm going to use my iron to try to heat set the ink. And I'm not going to use my iron over the cloth bare. I'm actually going to fold some freezer paper in half to protect my iron. So I'll have my fabric, freezer paper, and then iron on top of that so that the ink doesn't make my iron plate dirty. And while I won't know immediately which method is better, somewhere down the line after I've washed this sample mini quilt many times, I will know if one method is superior or if they're comparable, and I can make plans on how to do future tags based on how that mini quilt comes out. I finished my tags off camera yesterday because it was getting really hot in my sewing room and I needed to turn on my ceiling fan, and my ceiling fan is very noisy and it interferes with the audio of my videos. I think they turned out pretty well if you disregard the bad printing on this one specifically. Very wavy lines. I think in the future I'll try to stray away from straight lines. That might help. Although these ones printed pretty well. So I don't know. Maybe I just need to be extra sure that my freezer paper is very secure and that will alleviate a lot of the problems. So anyway, I finished them in two different ways. I did top stitching for this one and no top stitching for this one. This one was the more organic. I didn't use straight lines one. I just sort of sewed it and cut it out. Same with this one. Very wonky. I think I like it. We'll see. But all in all, I think they turned out pretty well. I added fusible interfacing onto the back of all of my designs just to give it a little bit more structure and make it a little sturdier, and I'm hoping that will help it stay nice and crisp on the quilt too when it washes. Then after I do the interfacing, I put the label that I've printed, right sides together with another piece of fabric, and then I sew all the way around. Then to turn them right side out, I make a cut on the back fabric, and I turn it right side out, and I press it so all my seams are straight-ish. I try to poke out my corners, but there's a little bit of bulk there, so I didn't get them perfectly pressed for all of them. But I kind of like the wonky, not quite perfect look of these tags. And honestly, I think the imperfections sort of make the tags look sort of cozy and nice and friendly. To top stitch, I use my zipper foot, and I have a little trouble with the corners because they get a little bulky and my machine doesn't quite grip and pull through. So what I do is I raise my presser foot and then hand advance the wheel 2 stitches and then put the foot back down and sew along like normal. And then when I come to this corner, I do the same thing. I hand advance the wheel a couple times, put the presser foot down, and then sew on. I know there's probably someone out there wondering why I bother with all the layers and all the finishing and everything. Why don't I just make it into sort of like a simple applique, you know, without the top stitching and the backing and everything? Most of all, I just really enjoy the look of the patch. It is pleasing to my eye, and that should be enough. But there's also a more practical reason, and that is so that you don't see the backing fabric through your tag, so it doesn't take away from the design. Or if it's like a more detail-oriented tag with lots of information on it, like names and dates and dedications and all that, it doesn't detract from the important information. So basically all that's left to do now is to arrange the patches on this mini quilt, and once I find an arrangement that I like, I'm going to glue them down with some Elmer's glue, and then once the glue is dried, I'm going to sew them down all with a nice quick applique stitch. This is going to have to do because I don't feel like being super fussy about this, so I'm just going to add my glue along my top stitching line in a thin bead. Oops. Doesn't need to be neat, I just don't want it to be in my sewing area. Maybe a little bit, oops, across here. And I'm probably going to put something heavy on top of this and then just let the glue dry naturally. I occasionally get questions about these precision glue tips in the comment section, so I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description in case you're interested. They're a little hard to find, but they're totally worth it, and I love mine. I use them all the time. Without further ado, here is the sample after just one wash. So there's not a big difference besides the wrinkliness that you get from washing a quilt, which I like. I think it's cozy. But if you look at these three on the side, they're the ones that I only heat set. I didn't use the white distilled vinegar. They are just a smidge lighter than if you compare to these ones over here. Especially, let's do a close-up. So compare this guy. He's a little lighter than he began. And this guy, you can see that there is no ink lifting from those letters. They're just as dark as they began. So I hope that you can see that on camera. I also noticed that the red in this one has definitely lightened up a bit. More than I was expecting, because I did use the vinegar on this, not just heat set. So that has already proved to be not quite as long-lasting as the black ink. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. I'm a little disappointed with this result, frankly, but you know, it was good to test it now instead of putting it on a quilt and finding out later. So anyway, that is all for now. I have about 29 more washes to do before this test is done, and I'll make another video to update you. Thanks for spending time with me today, quilters. If you want to support this channel and help me buy supplies and materials for future videos, please visit my Buy Me a Coffee page linked in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye!